Not too many people talk about this, but it looks like that Ukraine has a mind-blowing, genius plan to take almost the entire Crimean peninsula under fire control. And Putin himself acknowledged that yes, Ukrainian counteroffensive is happening right now. Russians are helpless, they cannot advance anywhere. That is why Putin is once again ready to end this war. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So if you remember, in St. Petersburg there is an international economic forum, and so there were these three guys who do not look like they're economists, but they were demonstrating their strength, dressed like Russian soldiers, VDV paratroopers. And among their superhuman capabilities is to destroy a rubber pouch, is to tear apart a tennis ball, and to bend steel bars. Pretty useful things to do on the front lines, but I mean, that's what they demonstrate. And to be honest, I have very serious suspicions that this might not be real Russian soldiers. So just let me know in the comments what do you think. And while you are doing this, can you also please like this video and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram, and this weekend I decided to randomly follow 10 of you back. The link is down below. And just a couple more words about this International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg. Putin today made his speech, and one of the main statements that he said is that Russia must increase its input of military industries. He then also acknowledged that yes, there is a Ukrainian counteroffensive, but they're being not that successful, losing hundreds of their military vehicles, and the losses of Ukrainians are 10-1 in comparison to Russians. Putin then also mentioned that Russia never started a war against Ukraine, it was all the West, but soon enough, in case this all continues, Ukrainian military will just cease to exist. And so this is just a perfect example how different and delusional the majority of Russian authorities and obviously Putin himself can be from just regular Russian people. For example, me personally, I do not think like this. None of my friends from the closest circle think like this either. But Putin wants the entire West to think that all Russians are exactly like this, that everyone just thinks exactly like Putin. And to say the least, this is not true. And I'm so glad that the majority of you guys, you realize this as well. And I want to thank you so much for not stereotyping every single Russian regular person just because of one crazy guy. I am proud to be Russian, but it does not mean that I unconditionally support my government. And being proud for me means to love my country, my friends and my relatives, to also know the history of my motherland, the history of my family, and to even build my family tree as early as possible back into different generations. And that is why I partnered with a #1 family history service called MyHeritage, which is trusted by more than 90 million people. And here is, for example, my very own family tree, my parents, grandparents, siblings, cousins, uncles and aunts, but it does not end here. You can always add way more people, such as for example your spouses and their own very own families, kids of your cousins, and of course great-grandparents. And it is done by simply clicking this plus button, then all you need to do is to input their first name, and that's pretty much it. You can also obviously add some more photos. All you need to do is to click this photo sign, select a picture you want to add, rescale it if you want, and pretty much that's it. But what if you only have a low quality black and white or this like sepia kind of pictures of your grandparents? Well, MyHeritage got you covered here as well, and to be honest, this is my personal favorite feature. Just upload the old photo, click enhance and colorize, and just look at the result. This is absolutely mind-blowing and incredible. It even looks like that my grandfather now can have his very own Instagram page. And just yet another absolutely incredible feature is that you can animate every single one of these photos. But then you might ask, does MyHeritage help you find your own relatives? And the answer is yes. Just click on any person of interest, then click this research this person, and MyHeritage provides you the access to more than 19 billion records. You are almost guaranteed to find something. And so, if you're excited as I am to build your very own family tree and discover long-lost relatives who lived probably centuries ago, just please go ahead and use my link down below. And the best part about it is that MyHeritage gives you a completely free 14 days access. And then, if you decide to continue, there will be a 50% discount for you to continue your subscription. Just make sure to use my link down below and apply the code TheRussianDude. Thank you so much MyHeritage for sponsoring this video, and now back to the program. Alright, and now let's briefly talk about the Western support to Ukraine, and then I will give you an update from the East, from the South, and the mind-blowing genius plan of Ukrainians to take almost the entire Crimean Peninsula under fire control. And so, in this first video, we can see the Croatian missile system RAG-12 installed on the Humvee in action. Next we have the statement from Belgium, which recently approved a new military support package to Ukraine, which will include M113 armored personnel carriers. Next we have the country of Sweden, which said that it will allow Ukrainian pilots to fly its Sub-JAS-39 Gripen fighter jets as a part of their next military support package. And speaking about the aerial vehicles, right now NATO is seriously discussing to send used F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine instead of new ones. Then we have the United States, which announced its next support package to Ukraine, worth of $205 million, and this one will be mainly focused on humanitarian support. And then the country of Spain will send 20 armored personnel carriers, 4 refurbished Leopard 2 tanks, and also 2 field hospitals to Ukraine. And ultimately, talking once again about Sweden, right here is the picture of the very first CV-9040C combat vehicles, which already arrived from Sweden to Ukraine. Right, and now let me give you a very quick update from the east, followed by an update from the south. But first of all, we need to make a quick stop in the north of Ukraine, where Ukrainians started digging at least 5 kilometers of trenches next to the border with Belarus and Russia, and also they laid thousands of mines. Next we go down to Kiev, where recently Russians tried to attack the city. Ukrainians were able to intercept these missiles, but unfortunately the debris has damaged a lot of residential areas on the ground. And just overall, in the last 24 hours Ukrainians were able to successfully intercept all 6 Caliber missiles, all 6 Kinzhal missiles, 2 Shahed drones and also 5 other drones. Then we go to the east of Ukraine, where according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians kinda resumed their offensive along Kupiansk-Svatove-Kreminna front line with no success as usual at all. And in return, Ukrainians continue to professionally eliminate individual Russian soldiers using drones, as you can see from this video. Unfortunately, as always, the consequences will not be allowed on YouTube. That is why you can find the full version of this video on my Patreon, along with hundreds of other footage. The link is down below, and there's still 1 week of free access. And speaking about one of the hottest points in the entire Ukraine, the city of Bakhmut, according to Anna Malyar, Ukrainians continue to advance closer to this city, mainly on the northern and southern flanks, and then according to Alexander Syrsky, Russians started to bring a lot of reinforcements closer to Bakhmut, because as of right now they can barely hold it, but let's see how this situation is gonna change once reinforcements arrive. Going even more to the south, to Vuhledar, we have this Russian, I would say, actor slash a little bit of clown Nikita Dzhigurda, who arrived to the front lines as he reported, and he was just standing next to this mortar, right here, in the open field, not being afraid to be eliminated by Ukrainians, which once again creates a lot of doubt about the reality of this video. And just overall, in the last 24 hours, Ukrainians were able to destroy 2 control points of Russians, 1 air defense system, 4 concentration of Russian forces, 3 ammunition warehouses and 7 artillery units. Right, and now as promised, just a couple of words from the south, before I talk about this genius plan of Ukrainians to take Crimea under fire control. And first of all, there is something that actually happened in Crimea, specifically in Sevastopol. There was a spontaneous blackout. Then we have some news from Kherson region, where unfortunately as a result of Russian attacks, some civilian infrastructure has been destroyed. And then according to the locals who live in the south, they mentioned that they see an increase in activity on the front lines. And for example, one of such things is that Ukrainians started to actively demine the front lines. But wait, there is more, because Ukrainian special forces, which are called the White Wolves, they released this video of them using drones, also destroying a lot of Russian concentration of their forces and equipment. And just in this video alone, they destroy at least 14 Russian targets. As always, the full video is on my Patreon. Another thing is that recently Ukrainians were able to destroy a major concentration of Russian forces which are occupying the hotel in Kherson region, and as you can see right here are the consequences as seen on the satellite images. But potentially one of the biggest news is that last night Ukrainian partisans crossed Dnipro river and engaged Russians in their combat activities on the left side of Kherson region. And still, even though the Russian army was attacking Ukrainian volunteers who were helping Kherson civilians to evacuate the region as a result of flooding, Ukrainians still were rescuing Russian soldiers who were suffering from the consequences of their man-made disaster. These soldiers are now captured as the prisoners of war, and later they will be exchanged. And just overall, according to once again Anna Malyar, Ukrainians in the Zaporozhye region, they still slowly but surely advance across 3 major directions. And then as you can see from this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control, a pretty big portion of Ukrainian territory has been liberated to the south of Velika Novosilka. And so, let me ask you this question. Probably some of you know that one of the directions of Ukrainian counteroffensive in the south is called Berdyansk, which is located right here. But have you asked yourself, why is it called this way? And well, personally, this is just my very own assumption. As soon as Ukrainians will be able to recapture and liberate Berdyansk, one of the very first things they'll do is to bring their HIMARS systems, and then it will bring them closer in range for such cities as Yalta and Mariupol. But then, if you remember, Ukrainians also have access to some longer range missiles, such as Storm, Shadow, and as you can see, it will be very well in range for Crimean Peninsula. And in case Ukrainians are successful at recapturing Berdyansk and bringing their missile systems, I'm almost certain that one of the very first targets will be Crimean Bridge, which will limit the ability of Russians to bring reinforcements. And then simultaneously pushing closer to the northern borders of the peninsula with the assistance of the long-range missiles, I'm almost positive that the majority of Crimean Peninsula will get under fire control by Ukrainians, with absolutely nowhere for Russians to retreat, which will only motivate them even more to surrender as soon as possible. And just once again at this very moment, this is only the assumption, but just think about it, Ukrainians do not even need to actually go inside Crimean Peninsula to liberate it, they can only threaten it so much, so that Russians will be so afraid to continue fighting. They also understand that Putin values Crimea so much, so he will most likely do everything in his power to negotiate, trying to save Crimea, including potentially ending the war. And we already have once again the very same statements, such as for example according to Dmitry Peskov, who says that Putin is ready, he was always ready, he is ready and he will be ready to resume negotiations, he is open for dialogue. And I mean, if you remember from the past, the number of such statements intensified right before major Ukrainian counteroffensive, so most certainly the higher government authorities of Russia, they know that as soon as Ukrainians accelerate and gain power, the counteroffensive will be unstoppable. Even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, they say that yes, Russia is ready to talk, but as long as Ukraine takes into consideration the current territories which Russia annexed, which basically never gonna happen on these conditions, but still even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs started talking about this. Because I mean, yes, in the past it was usually different people from the Russian government who were talking about resuming negotiations, but now when potentially we have Crimea threatened, this is when Putin himself started making such claims. And so, as you might already know, at this point he will do almost everything possible to save Crimea. The question is, where will Ukraine stop? I personally think they should not stop until they liberate all of their territories, but let's see. Most likely some very crucial table-turning events will start happening sooner than later, and if you don't want to miss them, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. The absolutely best way to support the channel is through my Patreon. You can also become my channel member or simply use the PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Guys, be careful, sometimes there are scammers in the comments pretending to be me. And thank you so much and see you next week.